Hello and welcome. This is a very special episode of Compass Need to Know. Today we're going to be talking all about the new Roth Catch-Up rules. My name is Chris Paterna, Chief Revenue Officer and partner here at Compass, and I'm joined by two of my favorite people here. We've got Anne-Marie Jeremy, who's our Vice President of Operations, who will be talking about this topic, as well as Denise Claire, who's our Director of Compliance here at Compass. We've got a lot to get to. Just some quick housekeeping items, everybody. We've got all the lines muted and the chat disabled. There's a lot to get through in our short half hour here. If you do have questions after the webisode, please follow up with us. There's a lot of information here, and a lot is still to be learned from some of these new IRS regulations. So let's jump into it here. You should be able to see our presentation up on your screen now. But again, at Compass here, we think differently and we work harder. So we are doing this webisode to help teach and educate our clients and our partners about this, and we'll be providing some other materials later through our social media and some of our compliance alerts. Now, what's our agenda today? We're going to talk about some background. What is the Roth Catch-Up and the new rules? Number two, what's the required election that must go on with this new process? Number three, we'll talk about after you make that election, what happens in the future if something goes wrong? What are the corrections for failures of this? And then four, we'll talk about the next steps. What are the action items we all need to take as we head into 2026? So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Anne-Marie. And Anne-Marie, if you could help give us some background on what these new Roth Catch-Up rules are all about.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. And thanks everybody for joining today. So, hot topic. The new Roth Catch-Up rule from Secure 2.0 mandates that catch-up contributions for highly paid individuals, HPIs, over age 50 and earning more than $145,000 in a prior year must make those contributions in the form of Roth. So it's really important to differentiate between HPIs and highly compensated employees. HPIs are a new category born out of these new rules. So the HPIs have a different compensation limit that will be indexed annually, just like the limits for the other categories of earners like key employees or HCEs. But it's important to remember that the HPEs are distinct from keys and HCEs. So HPI wages are also based on FICA wages, which is again different from HCEs and keys. The regulations stipulate that this is defined as box 3 in the W-2. And since these are based on FICA wages, self-employed people with Schedule Cs and K-1s are not affected by the new rule. So it is important to note that these also apply for our super catch-up eligible employees that have the increased catch-up limit if they're between ages 60 and 63. These extra catch-up contributions must also be in the form of a Roth. So the reason that we're talking about this is because there must be policies and procedures in place for how a plan sponsor will manage this new requirement. So the IRS released communications that the final regulations are effective for 2027. However, this new rule is in effect for 2026. Basically, this means that plan sponsors will need to abide by the new rules in 2026, even though the final regulations are not effective until 2027. So this is called making a good faith effort. So plan sponsors, TPAs, and record keepers need to proceed operationally in 2026 as if the final regs are in place. So there is instruction that notices must be provided to participants. However, there is not any clear direction yet on the type of the notice. So for 2026, there are some action items that need to be taken. Plan sponsors are going to have to identify the affected participants for us as your TPA and for your record keeper. It's really important that plan sponsors consult with their record keeper to understand what the systems can accommodate. We'll dive a little bit further into this later in the presentation, but the basic understanding here is that plan sponsors need to understand how the record keepers are going to manage their processing, corrections, and if they're going to have any involvement in the tracking of these HPIs. So the key takeaway to note here is that this is a payroll function. So plan sponsors not only need to consult with their record keeper, they need to consult with their payroll provider. How is the payroll provider handling this? How are they tracking it? Is there any manual intervention that's going to be required? So while it's important to gather this information and have a solid understanding of what your record keeper and payroll provider will be doing, We do not recommend any sweeping payroll changes until we have those final regulations. It would be really inefficient for plan sponsors to make sweeping changes for 2026 and then have to revert in 2027 once we have more information. So the main point I want to drive home is do not make assumptions on what your record keeper and your payroll provider are doing. And here's an example of why. You may have heard or seen guidance that participants should front load their Roth contributions at the beginning of the year if they intend to maximize their employee deferrals. The problem with this is that some record keepers are not recognizing catch-up contributions until the regular deferral limit is reached. So if someone does this, they may inadvertently end up with a record keeper initiated correction. So again, it's just really important to consult with your vendors so you know how they will be operating under these new rules.
Excellent. Thank you, Anne-Marie. And while you're on a roll here, if you don't mind, if you can talk about the different types of the two options for what your required election could be.
Absolutely. Yeah. So diving a little further into the mechanics of how this will work. There are two approaches to handling the participant election side of this, a deemed election or participant election. If the plan adopts the deemed election approach, this means that any catch-up contributions for HPIs will automatically be treated as Roth elections. This allows pre-tax catch-up contributions to be converted to Roth as a method of correction. So the participant has the option to stop contribution once the 402G limit is met, but it's not an option to continue over that limit in pre-tax. So this is actually the Compass default option, and what we're recommending. It's also the approach that many record keepers are taking. It's our stance that this is the more beneficial option for participants because there's not a chance of them missing out on contributions if they forget about an election they may have made at the beginning of the year. So that sort of segues into the other method, which is the participant election approach. If the plan adopts the participant election approach, this means the participant must proactively choose to make catch-up contributions. Once the participant reaches the 402G limit, contributions will be stopped unless the participant has made an election to have catch-up contributions withheld. So with this approach, any missed deposits of pre-tax catch-up contributions cannot be converted into Roth and must be refunded to the participant. So this is why we are recommending the deemed approach. If a participant does not make an election for catch-up contributions at the beginning of the year, they may inadvertently miss out on utilizing catch-up contributions without realizing it.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. It's great information. There's a lot of moving parts here.
Yes.
So we'll segue to what happens when money does go into the wrong source and something needs to be corrected. And we know there'll probably be many corrections because this is all new. So Denise, can you talk a little bit about some of the approved correction methods and the timing?
I can. I guess first let's talk about, how are these things going to fail? Obviously, the initial thing is someone's going to start deferring. They're going to hit the maximum during a pay period, and the deferrals are going to continue on a pre-tax basis. No, oops, what do we do now? So in a deemed election, we're going to go ahead and flip that over. Some other potential errors and where we could go wrong, where errors will occur, are less obvious. So if there's some failures related to testing. So failures related to testing would be like a violation of the 402G limit. Say maybe somebody worked for 2 employers during the plan year and realized that they overcontributed and are asking you to move money. Another instance, and probably what we're going to see most common, and it's probably least considered, is plans that do not have a safe harbor feature who are still subject to ADP ACP testing. So a plan that fails ADP ACP testing, there can be an HPI who didn't elect catch-up contributions at all that would be subject to a refund. So these corrections that are due to a regulation are tied to the deadlines for correcting. So a 402G failure has to be corrected by April 15th. An ADP ACP failure has to be corrected within 2.5 months or March 15th after the after the end of the plan year, unless the plan has an EACA feature, and they can be extended to June 30. There's a little bit of gray area about whether the recharacterization can be extended beyond these deadlines. So on the safe side, we're saying if these refunds due to operational, compliance failures need to happen, we're going to say that, and if they're not happened by those deadlines, they're going to have to be refunded. So excuse me for stumbling over that a little bit. It's just a little complicated. A regular failure, someone whose payroll didn't get stopped, that you have until the end of the year. So a 2026 failure, you're going to have until December 31 of 2027 to get that fixed. And those will be the most common forms of correction. Now, the way it will be corrected, provided if you're using the participant election method, if you don't have deemed recharacterization, the only way to correct these things is through a refund. So participants will get their money back, they'll get 1099 in the year of the distribution, and that's it. If you're following the deemed election, which is the one that Compass recommends, there's 3 ways that you can correct. The first method is via the Form W-2. Now, in order to correct via Form W-2, you have to catch it right away. You're going to have to catch it before the W-2s get issued. You don't issue a corrected W-2. You have to correct it right in those first couple weeks of January. So that's unlikely to happen. But if it does, we'll work with you. We'll get the source corrected at the record keeper, and we'll proceed as normal. The more likely is the in-plan Roth rollover conversion method. So in this method, we move the money from pre-tax to Roth. The participant gets a 1099-R. Again, that'll be taxable in the year of the correction. You can use this method even if you don't have plan provisions that currently allow for in-plan Roth conversions. It's an accepted correction method, and there's no plan change for this. Little special note, your plan must have Roth of the sources in order to take advantage of correction catch-up contributions at all. Compass has reached out to you if you don't currently have Roth in your plan, and if you want, most do. It's our default, and most plans currently have this source. So we've been proactive about that and making sure that everybody's set up to take advantage of this deemed election method. Finally, the last distribution is to do refunds. The last correction method is to do the refunds. As we discussed, they'll get 1099-R. For small corrections under $250, this is considered de minimis under EPCRS, and no correction at all is required. So if we catch it quick, we can leave it alone.
Great. Thank you, Denise. That's great information. But let's say you have multiple participants that need corrections. Can you describe what similarly situated participants kind of situation means? It's very hard to say that, but
I can.
coincidentally, it's on the next slide.
Exactly. Similarly situated participants are participants who are identified as HPIs for the same reason at the same time. So that's going to be the bulk of these people. So beginning of January, we're going to know W-2s are out. We're going to know who falls into this category. So you have 10 or 20 participants who we need to keep an eye on. Those are identified as HPIs. If any of them has a violation or multiple have a violation, we have to correct them all the same way. So again, we're leaning towards the deemed Roth characterization, the in-plan Roth conversion for the correction. You can't pick and choose which method. We can't say, you know, Joe had a good year. He'd like to have a refund because these refunds, of course, come with earnings. And so he wants to cash out. We can't pick and choose a method. So that's why you have to treat all corrections the same way. Someone who's not similarly situated is someone you find out later is an HPA. Maybe there's a correction to the W-2, or maybe there's a rehire that you hadn't identified in a prior year that you didn't identify. So that's not someone who was identified at the same time for the same reason. That's a different reason. So a correction for those people, a different method could be considered for someone who's not similarly situated. Does that help?
That's great. Thank you. It's a lot here. So now we're going to shift gears and talk about next steps. What are the action items? So we've listed this out for you, and your relationship manager here at Compass can help you with these as well. But number one, you need to decide on an election method. Like many record keepers out there, our default is this deemed election method. So that's the first step. Number two, don't make assumptions. Please review with your record keeper and also review with your payroll company. Emery gave some great examples. Is your record keeper going to treat the total contribution limit as one single bucket where it has to fill up your normal limit of currently 23,500 first and then go into the catch-up? Or are they going to treat it as concurrently? How much you're doing for catch-up and how much are you doing for regular contributions this week? Every record keeper is handling this a little bit differently. So check with them first. What is your payroll company going to be doing? Do they have systems in place? Do they have technology in place? Will they be coming out with something? Or is it going to be a manual switch or process on your part to go ahead and change that employee to a Roth catch-up contribution if it happens? Number three, adopt policies and procedures. So we've gone ahead and we have created a policy and procedure for this Roth catch-up rule. We will be providing that to everyone shortly. Will depends somewhat on the election method that you choose, but we are going to be pushing this out and discussing it with everybody shortly. It's very important that you have a policy and procedure in place to help you kind of identify how you're going to be handling the program in 2026. Again, final regulations are going to be coming in 2027, so there could be, and there probably will be, some slight adjustments to this. And I'll give you an example. The $145,000 FICA limit, that's looking at a prior year. That's going to be indexed with inflation. And currently, it does not include any self-employed individuals. Is that what the government intended? Just ignore all self-employed owners. Could they change that? Yes, they could. We don't know. So that's one of the things that we're watching as well. So that's number three. Number four is identify which participants will be affected. So this is going to come in two different methods. We're going to be adding a piece to our annual questionnaire each year to say, hey, who falls into this bucket? Again, the compensation limit is based on the prior year. So when you're completing your request, our annual data questionnaire in January, you'll have that data from your W-2s. Most record keepers, in fact, all the record keepers that I've looked at so far are going to be asking for this as well, either a spreadsheet upload or an indicator. So they have this information as well and can communicate it directly to the affected participants. And then number five, notify your participants. We've also gone ahead and drafted a notification letter that you can use. Again, currently the regulations don't stipulate when this has to go, how many times per year, but we've gone ahead and taking a conservative approach, created something based on what we know so far, so we can go ahead and help you get it out to those participants. So those are the 5 action steps that we are recommending, and we'll be kind of guiding you through here over the next several weeks. Still a lot to learn. We know there's going to be lots of questions on this. We encourage you to contact us, reach out to your relationship manager, send us information. There are lots of details with this. One of the questions we got the other day is, what if somebody made exactly $145,000? I guess it could happen. And the actual answer to that question is they would not be considered an HPI. It's actually, the way the language is written, is over 145,000. So you actually have to make 145,001 cents to be counted in this. So silly example, but that's just some of the stuff that we're learning and questions that are coming up. So with that, we threw a lot of information at you. We have recorded this. So please pass this on to friends, family, other folks in your office that may need to know about this. We would love to be able to spread the knowledge and make sure that we're all doing this correctly and as best as we can under this good faith effort for 2026 and beyond. So thank you all very, very much for joining us on this very special Compass Need to Know webisode. Anne-Marie and Denise, thank you guys so much for your information and for going through this with us. But today we are going to end it, and appreciate you guys. Stay tuned for our next one. and take a look at our Compass resources page for more information and articles as we create them. Thank you very much and have a great day.